Without rules, there will be chaos. That's why we all live in a society where it is filled with rules, regulations, and law. So, is it possible to trust our inner guidance instead of following blindly rules and then live harmonious with everyone and everything? Let's look into it in today's verse 18. Hi, welcome back to Oneness. Today is day 18 and we will be looking at verse 18 from Taoteching. So before we begin, let's observe few seconds of silence. Thank you. So now let's look at verse 18 from Taoteching. When the great Tao is forgotten, kindness and morality arise. When wisdom and intelligence are born, the great pretense begins. When there is no peace within the family, filial piety and devotion arise. When the country is confused and in chaos, loyal ministers appear. So this verse 18 from Taoteching was pretty intriguing for me. When I first read, I tried to understand what was the context in which Laotzu was talking about in verse 18. Then with few other translation and books, I got to know that he's talking about when we live out of Tao, that's what brings in the rules to the society. So this whole verse, he talks about why it is important to align ourselves with Tao so that we don't need to follow blindly the rules and regulation and law. Instead, we follow our inner guidance, which will lead us in the right way. So before we get into the verse and each line, I'd like to quickly share and give you a perspective about the verse 18. So the verse 18 primarily talks about we blindly following rules and regulations. So to understand this, I invite you to imagine a society where there is no hierarchy in the system. There is nobody called government and there is no law, there is no rules. So just think about it. What will be the society like? Is it really will be chaos, or will there be a lot of kindness, joy and empathy and sympathy with other human beings? Think about it. So now let's try to understand the root of law and regulation and rules. I believe the rules and regulations are formed as soon as the child is born. First, it is told to us by our parent that this is right, this is wrong. Then comes our family members. Then comes teacher. Then comes religion. Then comes society. Then comes government. So each one of them in the hierarchy try to tell us how to live with rules and regulation. And then that thought is completely installed within us by a simple system of pain and pleasure or punishment and reward. So if you look at anywhere, in any house, the kids are punished if they do something wrong. According to whom? According to a parent, according to the social norm. So they should not do certain things and they will get punished. And if they do a good deed, then they will get rewarded. So instead of making a kid or a child independent thinker, we try to make them follow the rules from an early stage. And that's why even when we grow up, sometimes we feel that rules are meant to be broken. Where do you think the thought is coming from? Rules are meant to be broken. And then some people get also thrilled by breaking the rules, right? It is kind of a joy because the reason is we don't completely neither understand the rule or accept the rule. That's why sometimes we want to challenge the rule all the time. And that is why the rule-based society is completely away from a Tao-based society or the inner guidance-based society. So when we follow through the inner guidance, we don't do things just because it is a rule. Instead, we do it because we know what is right. And it is not because of rules. So with that, let's try to understand the perspective of Laotzu in verse 18. When the great Tao is forgotten, kindness and morality arise. The Laotzu clearly here, he means that when we fall out of Tao, when we fall out of nature and inner guidance, and that is when the kindness and morality arise. What he means by is, when do we need kindness and morality? When that is our true nature. When we fall out of Tao, that is when the kindness and morality becomes a thing to do. And that is why we need to understand acting kind is not being kind. Acting morally is not being morally. And acting selflessly is not being selfless. So instead of being, we get away from Tao, the nature of our inner true guidance, and that's why we are forced to act kindly and we are forced to act morally because we fear that someone will judge us. And that with that fear, we act instead of be. And that's what he talks about in the first two lines. Then he goes with, when wisdom and intelligence are born, the great pretense begins. Here he talks about when we are away from the Tao, the nature of the true nature of our own self, we create a lot of thoughts and things, and then we believe that the knowledge and the wisdom is superior to being one with the nature. That's when we start pretending. And this also can be interpreted in another way. That is, a person who preaches things, or when he talks and advocates for how to follow the rules and being a lawful citizen, etc. But then, when the same law has to be applied for him or his family, you see them, they back off. They try to overrule that. They try to act differently. That's why he talks about the hypocrisy here. People pretend that these are all good with the knowledge and wisdom, whereas the same knowledge and wisdom has to apply for them, they act differently. That is why, instead of classifying people and applying things, we have to act neutrally. One law which is there for every single person. And that is the nature of Tao, or nature of inner guidance. It is not partial for one to the other person. Then we go to the other line. When there is no peace within the family, filial piety and devotion arise. Here it is a very interesting thought. Laotzu talks about when there is no peace within the family, then filial piety and devotion arise. He talks about when a parent and a child are not operating or not working from the inner guidance, and that is when there is a need for a devotion comes in. When I say devotion, for an example, I am a parent, and then what comes to my mind is so my son has to obey me. Because I'm his parent, he has to obey me and follow me, give respect to me. Instead, he cannot act otherwise. And he should also take care of me. Likewise, when the child as well, when he feels that he is no more loved, he also feels that, oh, my parent should do something. That is called entitlement comes in. So when there is all this devotion arise, it is because there is a lack of love between two. It is not because of a parent and child equation, but it is actually because the inner, unseeable inner guidance. So that is why it is important when we are a parent to treat the child with utmost care and love and kindness, instead of telling them what is right and not right and punishing them or rewarding them. With that, let's look at last two lines of verse 18. When the country is confused and in chaos, loyal ministers appear. So here, all it means is when the country goes through chaos, when people are restless and not following orders, that is when the minister will arise and create new rules and enforce it on people. So for that, the country has to be in chaos. What he means by loyal ministers are the ministers who are loyal to the government at that moment. But when the top government changes, even the loyal minister will switch his loyalty to the other person. That is so pity, right? So that's what happens, and that is very accurate. Even now we can see it in all the politics everywhere. The ministers, they change their loyalty from one to the other overnight. And that's what exactly Laotzu is talking about in this verse. To overall sum this whole verse 18, Laotzu talks about there's a cause and effect. But then before the cause, if you are self-centered with Tao, with nature and the way of being, then we don't need rules or regulation or minister. We don't need anyone. It is our inner guidance which guides us in the right way, the right path. We don't need to trust anything. And we don't have to question that what if I break the rule. Instead, we know what is right and then we do accordingly. With that, I like to quickly share one thought. I'm sure you must have heard about what you do when no one watches you, right? So that thought is, when no one is watching us, how do we follow our own self-integrity and self-inner guidance and act accordingly instead of feeling judged in front of someone and act differently? So that is where acting and being comes in. So with that, one actionable thought for today is, today if you're with any children, just try to speak to them. Instead of telling them what is right or wrong or good or bad, give them a situation which they can comprehend in their mind and come up with what choices they will make. And then you try to reason it out to them with their choices and why they make those choices instead of judging them, and allow them to connect with their inner self. So that way they will grow up eventually as a conscious person who is truly guided by their inner guidance instead of relying on rules and laws and other regulations to follow. So that way they will be a wonderful citizen as well as wonderful kids. So with that, let's end for today and see you tomorrow. Thank you.